I'm Micah Smith, and this is AAIllustrates. This week, we're going to be looking at the Control Room API, and we're going to build a bot and then trigger that bot from the Control Room API using Postman, and we'll walk through that entire process. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, what is AAIllustrates? AAIllustrates is an episodic series for those who are interested in building in robotic process automation on the Automation Anywhere platform. It's a place where you can come and ask questions, get answers. A lot of the videos that we're building are in response to questions that people have or in topics that they want to see more about. So definitely follow us on these different social channels we have listed over here. And be sure to like and subscribe to our videos and our content so that we can know what kind of stuff you want to see, right? These are for your benefit, and so we want to help you to learn and help you to figure out the kind of things you're stuck with. So with that said, let's get into this week's topic. So we're going to talk about how I can interface with a bot using the Control Room API. And this is a really cool functionality in my opinion, and one that I don't see a ton of customers using to its full benefit. So we're going to talk about some of the value in that and exactly how to do it so that you can be one of those customers that's using it. We'll also go and do a full bot build, and we'll also trigger that bot from Postman. And so if you followed the AAIllustrates series, a couple episodes ago, we did an introduction to the Control Room API. We introduced a Postman Collection that has, I think, 45 or 50 different endpoints. So we'll be using that same collection, and I'll post a link to that down below as well. So first off, for just a basic background in case you missed that Control Room API session, an API is an application programming interface, and that receives a request, it does some action, and then sends a response. Well, hopefully it does some action, then it sends a response, right? So we could use that to create a new user. We're going to use it here in a little bit to authenticate and then to deploy a bot. And so there's lots of different things you can do with the Control Room API. The Automation Anywhere Control Room provides various public APIs to allow you to control and manage your Automation Anywhere environment. So if that means looking up users, creating new users, managing bots, managing your bot inventory, bot lifecycle management stuff, all of that are capabilities of the Control Room API. So we're going to be using a Postman collection that was created and shared that has a bunch of those endpoints mapped. It doesn't have every single endpoint mapped, but it has a good number of them here listed as 45 plus. We also have some test scripts included, specifically on the authentication endpoints. There's a authenticate by API key and authenticate by username and password. Both of those have test scripts to grab the auth key. So once we get that, it will save that as a variable, and then we can use that for all subsequent calls. So what that means is, like, I have to authenticate before I can actually do anything in the other API endpoints. So I would authenticate, I get this token, and then I would reference that when I'm calling to create a new user or to deploy a bot, right? And that's my way of telling the API, hey, you know who I am, and here's this token or here's this key that proves that I validated. There's also sample calls for each endpoint. So there's a brief example of how to use each one. There's also an example of where you can see documentation or Swagger reference to these endpoints. So I try to include those as much as possible as well. So when we think about creating a bot and triggering it from the Control Room API, there's a couple things we have to figure out. One, we have to create a bot, right? We have to have a bot that we're going to specifically trigger. We're going to do that part together because I want to show you how to create a bot that can actually receive values. And that's a big key, right? Just triggering a bot is like kind of cool, but triggering a bot and passing it values is where you're really going to see a lot of value from this Control Room API, right? And before we go through this, let's think about some examples, right? If I have a workflow application, let's say, internal to my organization, and hey, it'd be really great if our workflow application could be tied together with our RPA application so that we could automate some of those steps in the workflow. Let's say the bot runs, it does some kind of task after I pass it values, and then it calls back to my workflow application to move that work item to whatever the next phase is. And whether that's a final human review or whether that's on to some other automated step. If I'm able to do that by tying together that workflow application and my RPA application, my Automation Anywhere, then I have a lot of power in what I can do fully automated, right, with no human intervention. And so while the scheduling and triggering is cool, I think that the next level of RPA for a lot of organizations is being able to integrate Automation Anywhere with the existing apps that they're already using. So that's kind of the why you would use this, or why this matters. We're going to have to do a couple things. First, we're going to have to authenticate, right? We have to get that token. And that token is just us calling out to the control room API to authorize, and then assuming that our username and password or our API key is correct, then it's going to give us that token. And that token is basically our secret password that will pass to the other API endpoints so that we can actually take those specific actions. So we have to get our token. The next thing we have to do is we have to get the ID of the bot we want to trigger, right? So ultimately, we're working towards being able to send a bot, right? We want to send a trigger to a bot so it'll actually run. But for me to be able to know what bot that is, or tell the control room what bot that is, I have to have the bot's ID. So we're going to do that. And we're going to use the repository management API for that. And we'll look at that here in a minute. We'll see exactly how that works. The next thing we have to do is we have to get the identity of the user to run the bot, right? So each of my bot runners has a specific user assigned to it. So I need to get the ID of that user so that when I'm telling the control room, again, through the API, hey, you need to run this bot and it has to be run by this user, I need both of those data points, right? So I'm going to show you how to get that. And we'll actually talk about two ways to get it. One that's like the pure API way, and one that's like the other way to get it, if you're just trying to shortcut it. And then finally, we'll need to send a trigger to the bot, right? And this can be done with or without values, and I'm going to show you how to do it with values, and we could just leave those off one time so we can see how it works without. But we're going to send a trigger to the bot. We want that bot to actually execute. We want it to run under the user context that we expect, and then it's going to do whatever we set it up to do. And we're going to have just a really basic bot build, so it's not going to be anything crazy. But we just want to make sure the bot's able to receive those values that we map to it, and then prove that it received those. Now, as far as our hands-on demo, we're going to do this together. So if you want to build along with me, that's cool. We'll do that. We're first going to build a simple bot that can be called from the control room API. We're just going to have like probably 2 values that we'll map to it. And we'll have it write those values out to a log file, right? Because that's something we haven't done in AAIllustrates, and I haven't done that in Quick Tips either. So we'll do that. We'll use the control room API to authenticate and deploy, and then we will verify that the bot can be deployed. And we'll look at a couple other variations of how we could use this, as well as like what it looks like without passing values, stuff like that. All right, so let's jump over to our control room. So I'm in just the bots directory here. I've got a ton of folders. I have a folder that I specified for AAIllustrates. Again, you don't have to follow this exact thing, but you can if you want. And then I have a folder that I created that was called API test. So I'm going to be building inside of this. So what I'm going to do is click this little icon here for a new bot. And let's call this one AAIllustrates API test. Side bonus tip here, be a good person about saving your bots into subdirectories and organizing them in a way that makes sense. I have some control room environments where I haven't done that, and it's a nightmare, and I have all these files that are called like scratchpad and test, and I have no idea what they are. So you know, for the future self, make sure that you save these to the correct folder. All right, so we have our bot here. Now, the fact that this is being called from the control room API really doesn't matter a whole lot to our bot build, except for one thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 variables, and I'm going to call this sinput1, and I'm going to mark it as input. Okay, and that's really important. If I want to pass values to this bot on trigger, or when it runs from the control room API, it has to be marked as an input value, okay? And I also want to make note of the fact that this is sinput. So I'm going to copy that, or whatever this is. Oh, I need that actually. Hold on a second. Okay, we'll do a new notepad document. I'm going to put it there just so I have it. I'll move that out of the way. I'm going to do one more. sinput2. Again, I'm going to mark it as input. I'll hit create. And I'm going to mark that here, right? This is just The notepad thing is not something special. It's just so that when I'm actually triggering the bot, I know what my input variables are called, so I know how to map to those. All right, so we've got both of those values. What I'm gonna do, let's do something really basic because I want to make sure that this will work on a remote machine as well. So we're just gonna log to a folder, and I'm gonna say, let's do create and if. So I'm just dragging these two over here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do an if statement to see if a folder exists. So on my if statement, I'm in this condition here, and I'm going to go to folder, and I'm going to say folder does not exist. And I'm basically checking for the presence of an absence. So I'm checking to see that if I go to C temp AAIllustrates, does that folder exist? Okay. On my local machine, it might. On my remote machine, I know for a fact that it doesn't. So let me go to C temp. Okay, I have it here. So I'm just going to delete it. All right. So if that folder does not exist, I'm going to create that folder. Okay, and that's what my folder : create action is here. So the folder that I'm going to create is going to be that same path. Copy that right here. And hit save. So I'm only going to execute this command here, this create a folder, if the folder does not already exist. All right, and then I'm going to do the same thing for a file. So I can actually nest this one because I know the file won't exist in that folder if the folder itself doesn't exist. But just because the folder exists doesn't necessarily mean that the file exists. So in this case, I'm going to do an if statement that says if file does not exist. And again, I'm going to use that same path. For me, it's just C temp AAIllustrates. And I'll say API log.txt. And we'll hit save. Actually, I'm going to copy that file path out. So if that file does not exist, I'm going to do the same thing that we just did with the folder, and I'm going to create the file. So let's go to create, drag that over here, paste that file path. I'm going to say overwrite existing. Actually, that wouldn't matter because that would never hit. So I'm going to hit save. That would never hit because I'm only in a condition statement here that assumes that the file does not already exist. So that's fine. All that did was just set up our file. So I'm going to minimize this real quick. That just allows us to have a place to log to. The next thing we're going to do is log to file. So on the actions pane here, let me move this over here. And I'll actually do this in dual. Some feedback that we got was that some people build in dual all the time, and I normally build in this flow view, so I'm going to try and build in both so everyone can be satisfied. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is log to file. So log to file, I'm going to drag that outside of all of my if statements because this needs to log after all these files have been created. And we may not actually have to create any of them because if we run this on a subsequent run, those files would exist. For my file path, I'm going to paste that same thing in there, ctemp AAIllustrates API log.txt. I'm pasting it in there instead of hitting browse because right now that file doesn't exist. So I'm pasting it in there because that's the file path I want to use, and I expect that the file will exist when the bot actually runs. For the text to log, I'm going to put, let's see, I'm going to put, I'm just going to put input1 : and then I'm going to put in our value, which is s input1 string. I'm going to say append, so that's fine. I'm going to copy that same action and paste it. Oops. So we'll copy action, paste after action, and I'm just going to change this to input2, which is my other valid value. All right, I'm going to run this, and I'll give a value here. So test and run. These values are popping up like this because we mark those variables as input. So that's why we see that. I'm going to hit confirm, I'll drag my temp directory over here. It's downloading some dependencies. Now it should execute. Okay, so there's my AAIllustrates folder. There is my file, APIlog.txt. So I have my first value that I passed in and my second value that I passed in. Cool. So hopefully you got that. Again, if you only wanted to see this for the API part, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we're having a bot that we all kind of generally understand so that when we trigger it from the control room, we know what's happening. All right, so I'm gonna hit close here. My bot's been tested. I know it works. And the other thing is I know it should work on any machine, right? Because any machine should have a ctemp directory. And I know that it's going to create the AAIllustrates folder inside of that and my APIlog.txt inside of that. So this should work for any machine. I'm going to check in the taskbot because for me to deploy it, it needs to be in the public directory. Right now it's in my private directory, which is just where I do my work. So I'll put API test and hit check in. Perfect. So if we go to the public directory inside of my AAIllustrates, I have API test, and there is my bot. So it's good. Let's now go over to Postman, and I'll close this out so we have nothing open and mine can look like yours. I have a bunch of other Postman collections. You can ignore those for the time being. What I'm working on here is the Automation Anywhere A2019 Postman collection. Again, I'll share this in the description of the video, so you have that. This was shared last time we did the Control Room API AAIllustrates, so you can see it there as well. But the first thing we need to do, like we talked about in our slides, is authenticate. And I'm going to go to the authentication API. I'm going to be using the authentication via username and password. If you want to do it with API key, that works as well. It's going to be the same process. You just need slightly different things. So I have my control room URL here. I have my V1, which is basically the extension of where this control room API endpoint exists, which is authentication. And then in my body, I'm passing in a username and a password. Now, notice that my control room URL and my username and password here are in those like double curly brackets. Within Postman, that's how you can reference a variable. And so these are environment variables. And if I open this up, let's see, I want to hit the eye icon here. I can see what my control room URL is. I can see my username. I can see my password. That's going to be blocked out for you. I can also see my token, right? I have a token that was from the last time I was using this. We're going to get a new one here in a second. So that value is going to be overwritten. So if we go to tests here, we can see that what's happening is on that response, we're parsing the JSON to get the response body, and then we're looking at the token. And we're going to pull that token value out, and we're going to set it to a token value here. So let's go ahead and run this, and that's going to update our environment variable. So I'm going to hit, our environment token value. So I'm going to hit send right there. Notice I got a token as the response, right? This is automatically, so let's just look at the first couple of characters, EYJHB. If I look at my environment variables, I see that that's the same thing, EYJHB. So that got copied over here. So every other one of my calls that references that token will automatically work because I have a valid token right now. All right, so we have a valid token, we're good there. The next thing we have to figure out is our bot itself, right? And we called ours, let me see if I can swap back here, AAIllustrates API test. So I'm going to copy that text real quick. I'm actually going to put that in my notepad document. I've got my magical notepad document of the random stuff we have to remember in case one of us forgets. That will be me. All right, so I'm on the repository management API, and I'm going to minimize this one. Repository Management API, and I'm on this one that says Workspaces, Folder, Files, List. And if I come up here, I can see a couple notes here. This is a link to the Swagger URL for this particular endpoint on the Community Edition. And then here, there's an extra note that says where Workspace folder is either public or private, right? because we're doing a bot deployment, we want to make sure we're working on the public directory. So I have public here, and then files/list. Now, within my body, I can basically indicate exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to comment out this filter to start with. So right now, the only thing that it's doing is I have, it's going to be doing it by name ascending, right? That's the sort order, the only thing that's going to really be applying there. So what we can see is I'm seeing every single asset in the control room, right? I'm seeing PNGs that were used for recording steps. I'm seeing other bots. I'm seeing everything, right? What we're specifically looking for is that AAIllustrates API test. I found it, right? That's not the best way to do that kind of search though. What I'd be better off doing is using this filter. So I'm going to uncomment this out. For my operator, I have EQ, and EQ is basically shorthand for equals. So I'm going to leave that. It's just at EQ. If yours isn't like this, I'll leave this up for a second so you can make yours look like this. For field, I have name, right? So what's the field that I'm actually looking for? Here I can see the field is name. And what's the value for that? It should be AAIllustrates API test. So if I hit this, I'll hit send. Now I should only get one response. I mean, you might get a couple if yours is more generically named, but I only got one item coming back as opposed to, I don't know how many I saw before, but a couple hundred probably, right? So I've found, I know this is the right one. The path is bots, AAIllustrates API test, AAIllustrates API test. Remember, I'm not a monster. I don't put everything in the root of bots anymore. That's the old me. So I have my ID for this particular object, and it's 1622. So I'm going to copy that out because I'm going to need that. 1622. All right, the other thing I have to figure out is the user. So let's minimize repository management. Again, it's still up here, so if I need to flip back to it and look at it, I can do that. But for right now, I'll just leave it like that. I'm going to go to the user, and I'm going to search for users. Okay, so again, very similar to what we had for the last one. My token is already mapped there, so I don't have to do anything with that. When I go to my body, here we can see that everything is currently commented out. So if I hit send, all my filtering is commented out. I'm getting a list of all of the users on here. If I want to further specify that, I can use those same kind of operators. So let's go here. I'll copy the filter we used on this one. Let's see, just copy these 3 lines. This will change just a little bit because my values are changing, right? I don't think it's called name. We'll check real quick. It's probably called username. So yeah, it is username. So I'll copy that and I'll put username. And this is the username for my bot runner, right? So this is going to be Micah_BR. And I'll hit send. Okay. Again, I can see that it's now only returning a single item, which is Micah_BR. This is all the information about that particular user account. What I'm specifically needing is that ID, which is 18. Copy that back over to my magic notepad. So let's see, my bot ID is 1622. My user ID is 18. I think we should be good. So what I'm going to do, my bot runner is one of these clients. I don't know which one, so I'm going to connect all of them real quick, and then we'll just see it actually executing. This is Remote Desktop Connection Manager. This is a Windows tool. If you haven't used this and you're managing lots of VDIs or lots of remote machines, this is a helpful tool. You can actually interface with this, like I can actually move stuff on this small. Yeah, there we go. I can move stuff on this small window if I need to. Obviously, it's not going to be that machine because it was running version 11. But anyway, I'm going to leave that up here in the background when we switch back to make our API call. So the last thing we need to do here is the bot deploy API. There's only one endpoint there. Open that guy up. Again, for my header, I've got the token automatically mapped. For my body, I made notes on this as best I could, so you can hopefully make sense of it. Here at the top is my file ID, which is going to be the ID for my bot, which for us, well, for me was 1622. Again, your numbers for your ID and your run as user are going to be different, so just make sure to not copy me exactly here. 18 is my user ID for the same bot runner, so I'll leave that guy alone. Some other things you can do here if you wanted to have a callback URL. I've got my X authorization token here, so I put that in. And then here is the big important part, right? My bot input. And this is where I can map values to my bot. And so I've got 2 string values. And the way that you set these up is this actual JSON object has to be named after the variable itself. And that's why I made a note of what my variables are called. So mine was just called sinput1 and sinput2. So let me correct these. Whoops. Got trigger happy. All right, sinput2. And then sinput3 was on here from a test that was done a while ago when creating that this Postman collection. You can just delete it. You won't need it for this exercise at least. And let's put a message here that says test values from AAIllustrates. All right, we'll hit send. This is a little bit meta, but while I was editing this video, I realized that I didn't give a great description of what a bot creator is versus a bot runner. And that difference is really important for this video. So before we actually show the bot running, let me just quickly explain the difference between a bot creator and a bot runner. So breaking this down, in my control room, I have 2 types of connections that have been established. I have my bot creator and I have my bot runner. My bot creator is what I used in the beginning of the video. So when we went through and we actually created that bot to do the logging and to take in those values, we're using the bot creator account. And for those of you who are using Community Edition, when you get a Community Edition account, what you're getting is a bot creator account. On the flip side, I have a bot runner account. And the bot runner account is where I have a bot agent that's been installed. It's actually the same bot agent that we use for the creator, but that bot agent has been installed and it's connected to my control room. And it's basically just listening and waiting for an event, right? And that event could come from the control room, running a schedule. It could come from triggering like we're doing in this video. But that bot runner is really just there to wait and receive tasks. That bot runner license can't develop bots, it can't create bots or anything like that. It's just there to be able to run and execute those tasks. So what we're showing in this next part of the video is what it looks like when, hey, we've created something as a bot creator, we've uploaded it to the control room, it's in the control room, now we're using an account to trigger that task or that bot being sent to one of my bot runners. And in this case, we just sent it to Micah_BR. So just wanted to include that helpful context there so you hopefully had an understanding of what's going on, the bot creator versus the bot runner. I didn't show how to connect a bot runner to the control room. I'll do another video for that later, but that's hopefully a process you're somewhat familiar with. This is just on how do I trigger a task to run on the bot runner. All right, back to the video. Now, we got a deployment ID, so that means it actually sent the task out, and we should see that on one of these, oh, there it is right there. We missed it. All right, let me trigger it again. I'll run it one more time so we can actually see. There we go. We'll do side by side. I think it was B, one of the B's. I think it was B2. Let me run this one more time. So I'll hit send. I got a deployment ID. There it is. It was a regular B. All right, so it ran right there. If we go check out this machine, let me maximize this. Here's my AAIllustrates folder. Here's my API log, which was that text file that the bot was creating. And then here are my values. Again, because we had append, that's why we're just seeing these added as new rows. I could have done override or whatever, but that's why we're seeing it twice, because I ran it twice. So that's how you would trigger a bot from the control room API and pass values with it. Now, if I didn't want to pass values, I could do that. I think it probably won't cause an issue for our bot. Let's just try to comment this part out real quick. Let me make sure I get all of it. Yep, right here. We'll comment that out. So I'm just hitting control plus the question mark / key if you want to do a bold comment like that. I'll hit send again. So this time we're running it. Oops, let me get back here. but we didn't pass the values to it. So it might have just created 2 blank lines here. It did. So we have 2 blank lines. I mean, we have the input, but we don't have what the mapping is. So that input is technically an optional object. I don't necessarily have to map it, but if I want to, there is a place for me to map to it. Okay. So anyway, you can choose to map that, or you can choose not to map it. So for ideas with this, like I said, workflow management and integrating that with a bot, I think is a really cool use case. You could create some kind of web app where you're actually, have a little, kind of a small front end built out where you have maybe 3 or 4 bots that you've pre-configured, and you have like 5 or 6 different machines for your bot runners. That would be one way to set this up, and then let someone just trigger it from there. And you could dynamically, based on the bot they selected, have a couple fields set up that they could fill in, and then you could grab the input from those fields and pass that to the bot. That would be another interesting use case that I could see people using. But this is really, really advanced ways to integrate your bot with other things that you're already doing. And I say advanced because I think this is awesome functionality, and it should be something that people are super, super eager to get into. Let's hop back to this PowerPoint real quick and we'll finish up. So as a recap, the APIs allow applications to expose certain functionality to developers for consumption. In this case, it's a lot of the same functionality that we already have in the control room. Being able to trigger a bot, being able to figure out the ID of a user, or figure out the ID of a bot itself. So that's really what's being exposed here. Before we do that last recap, hold on one second. I want to show you one other thing. I promised you I would show you 2 ways to do this. So the other way that you can get those IDs for everything is if I click on the actual object itself, right? Like I'm on AAIllustrates API test. If you look in the address bar, right, 1622, that's the same ID that we were just referencing. And the same thing is true for my runner account. So if I go back over here, look at administration and users, and it was Micah BR. Again, going back to this, user ID was 18. Here I can see 18 right there. Okay, so if you're just doing some quick testing and you wanted to see how to do this without all the other API calls, that's another way that you can get those 2 data points. All right, done interrupting our conclusion here. I would suggest creatively thinking about how your organization may be able to leverage the control room API. Again, I think this is awesome functionality and it's oftentimes overlooked, but this kind of integration is key to scaling and succeeding with RPA. So how could you better integrate with your workflow application or any kind of work management application that you're using? Maybe I have a bot that would be triggered ad hoc through a web form. You could trigger it through, sending a message in WhatsApp, or trigger it through Alexa or Google or something like that, right? Those are other opportunities for you to trigger a bot. Making sure mine didn't wake up. And then finally, sending a data for a bot in real-time processing, right? So if I'm, working at a call center and I need a bot to go fetch some information or take care of this task while I do something else or actually listen to the customer, I could send a couple values to a bot. The bot goes off and runs. It sends me an email back or somehow gets that data back to me, and I can then take action accordingly, right? So those are different use cases of using the control room API to expand on what you're already doing with your RPA initiatives. Cool. So hopefully you found this session helpful. I know this was kind of a longer one. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to see more of. We're always checking the YouTube comments. We're trying to reply to people as much as we can. I look at them. We have a whole team that looks at them. So be sure to leave those comments. Also comment to us on our Twitter account and LinkedIn. We're very active on all of those different channels, and I get on there as well. So I try to help out and reply to people as much as possible. Cool. So thanks again for your time. Hopefully you're able to use the control room API to trigger bots and get that working in your environment. Go be great.